Welcome to Shop Talk Live episode number 278. I have a cold while I'm recording this intro, so I'm going to keep this short. This episode is Mike, Anissa, and me talking about all sorts of stuff, especially plywood and Anissa's new obsession. Maybe it's not new, I don't know, but Rowan Woodworks. Just want to remind everyone, now is the time. If you were on the fence about getting in on Mike's next Foundations of Woodworking course, save yourself some money, early bird discount right now. findwoodworking.com/e-learning. We had a great time last year. I'm sure we'll have a great time this year coming up. It's going to be a blast. All right, we'll see you there. On with the show after a brief word from our sponsor. Mortise and Tenon magazine is a celebration of handcraft and historic furniture making. Published twice per year and without advertisements, it's more like a journal than a magazine. Mortise and Tenon explores period furniture, hand tools, green woodworking, and lots more for experienced and beginning woodworkers alike. Mortise and Tenon highlights the unique beauty of the handmade because timeless craftsmanship is worth celebrating. You can find out more or subscribe at mortiseandtenonmag.com. That's mortiseandtenonmag.com. All right. So, do y'all just want to get into questions, or is there anything you've been dying to talk about? We were just talking about clamps.
I like your clamp racks. I like the backwards.
I'm pretty proud of the clamp racks. Yeah. For audio only listeners, we finally have clamps hung up in the shop, and I know we've said this before, but it's always, every time we talk about the shop on the podcast, it's like, oh, we just did this, and now it feels like a shop. Now it feels like a shop.
Yeah.
Because hanging the clamps really forced me to hang more plywood on the walls and hang up more of the little apparatuses next to the machines. And then I got the label maker, and I've been labeling the walls behind, if you take something off the wall, there's a label to tell you what's missing. So, but now it's really starting to feel like a shop to me. And I'll say the same thing again in like 2 months.
It's a little nicer than the crime scene outlines where you outline all your tools on the pegboard.
I almost thought about doing that,
yeah,
but then you're kind of married to it. Yeah.
Well, nice job. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah. Looking really good.
Yeah.
It is true. You come in, you get all the machines set up, workbenches set up, like you're done. It's like, no, there's still like not only so much left to do, but really the majority of the shop setup is still left to do. And it's this little stuff, getting the clamps right, getting the little plywood out on the wall so you can hang stuff up.
Figuring out, I think Barry and I debated for like 10 minutes the other day, like, well, do the cordless drills go here, or do they go there, or do they go there? And then at one point we're like, let's just buy all new cordless drills. But then that felt a little wasteful. But so that we could have a set up here by the bench and then a set down by the drill press.
Oh, you should have done it before I knew about it.
I'm taking that as a okay.
Yeah, keep that for later.
Yeah.
You know what I do realize that I miss from the old shop is that long countertop with the drawers and the cupboards. And it was always knew what you wanted was somewhere along that shelf instead of having the individual things.
Yeah. Well, I think eventually we'll have counter space behind the wall where all the miter saw boxes are. I think we'll have counter space there. I think we'll have some counter space here so that we can cut off the walking path where this is great audio. I apologize. Well, there is a vacuum hose running from the wall to the middle of the room for the table saw. And I want to have counter over that so that you can't walk past that. But yeah.
Cool.
Well, let's answer some questions.
All right.
Let's jump in. All right. This first one is from Fred. Is it of absolute importance to have a dead flat assembly table to glue up your work square and keep it square? I ask because I built a dresser and glued it up checked it for square and moved it to my floor, which is steel plates. Rechecked it for square and it was fine. Came back the next morning and took it out of the clamps and it was out of square. I had to disassemble it and reglue it. Very frustrating. So now I'm looking to build an assembly table that is flat and level so that I know how flat it does. So what I want to know is how flat does it need to be? Thanks and keep up the great work.
I want to know what kind of joinery he used for the case. That's one.
Okay.
But without knowing that, then I'm going to say like, well, how tight were his clamps? I mean, you're gluing up that case, you're checking it for square. Even if it was on a flat assembly table and that was tightly clamped, and if you picked that assembly up and you moved it somewhere else, I still think it would be square the next day. I'm a little baffled.
I'm baffled by the moving it part.
Why not just leave it on the flat assembly table and let it dry?
On the bench. I think it was a
bench.
So I always come back to, I don't know anyone with an assembly table. Do you?
My outfeed table.
Yeah.
And my workbench.
But do you consider that like the dead flat torsion box?
I consider workbench or outfeed table flat enough to get you in the ballpark. Because depending on where it's going, the floor it's going on, especially if it's an older house, the floor is probably not flat.
Yeah.
Anyway, which kind of leads me back to Anissa's question. What joinery did we use on this dresser? And because of certain things like a dresser, it's like pieces that are big enough and heavy enough, they find their own flat. Like you can glue it up, quote unquote, square. And if you put it on an uneven floor and the joinery isn't really holding everything together, it will settle into that new non-flat. So if you have doors with perfect reveals and then you put it in a house and the whole thing settles, all of a sudden your door reveals are going to be off. But I think to your point, it's like, yeah, if it's square in clamps, it should be square out of clamps. But then it gets into clamping pressure in that the two types of joints in relation to clamp pressure are those where clamping pressure benefits the strength of the joint, like a panel glue up edge to edge. And those joints where clamping pressure has nothing to do with the strength of the joint, which is like a mortise and tenon joint or dovetail joint. All the clamps are doing is sort of holding the parts in position, hold the joint closed while the glue dries. So in which case you shouldn't have a ton of clamping pressure. And if you're really clamping so hard that you're bringing everything either out of whack and then you take the clamps off and release that clamping pressure, things can go a little bit wonky.
Well, especially if his dresser was dovetails, and you might be apt to not apply the clamping pressure directly on the corners of the dovetails.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go on. And the other thing about if you took it out and it's not square, the main thing are like the drawer openings. Are those still square? So maybe the feet don't rest evenly on the floor, but the overall case is square, in which case maybe you're just trimming feet instead of disassembling and re-gluing. A lot of things going on.
Maybe it was a miter joint without any splines or anything to kind of locate things.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, is there a back in place for the dresser yet? Because the back is going to pull everything in. In which case, yeah, a lot of times, like you can, even like for drawer boxes, for instance, I'll try to measure square, but I won't put the bottoms in until it's done, and then I can fit it into the case. And if one side is slightly sticking out or the other, just by gluing the bottom in place and squishing it into square, the bottom will hold it square. In the same way for a case back, well, often I'm relying on the back of a case or cabinet to really lock that into square. So even if it's slightly off, you may be able to fix it that way.
I feel like maybe part of my answer would be that a dead flat assembly table is not going to guarantee you square and dead flat glue ups. Maybe it's one less thing to worry about, but I don't think that would trump, squaring sticks. or measuring corners or any of that stuff.
Yeah, I'd say flat enough is good. Like a workbench, if you want to get super accurate, maybe stick it on your table saw tabletop if it's small enough to get up there. Yeah, but getting sort of like, and then you ask what a machinist thinks of in terms of what is dead flat, and that's like way beyond woodworking dead flat. So,
and then you ask home building type person, and they go in the other direction. They think we're nuts.
Yes.
But I would glue up a case on one of these benches and feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah. I would, because it's my only option too. But I think, I know when I got started in woodworking, it was all the rage that everyone built torsion box assembly tables. And they used the wires stretching corner to corner to make sure there's no wind in it. You're perfectly creating a level surface with sawhorses to put the MDF on to start the assembly of the torsion box and blah, blah, blah. And I felt like, I need to have that. I can't make anything flat or square. And I decided to start making ukuleles, which nothing's flat and square anyway. So, but I've never been to a shop with anything like that. I cannot think of anyone who has a true flat surface. I think everyone flattens their workbench when they make it. And maybe they might revisit every 10 years. I don't know, but they're just like, it's fine. So I don't think that that the place you're putting the piece on matters as much as the techniques, the joinery being square. Like your 10-inch shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's really what's determining square. As long as the joints are seated, are your ends of your tendons square? Yeah, that's a good point. Most work tends to be fairly self-squaring, a lot of joinery. Something like a dovetailed case where there isn't a lot of surface area at those joints, that's something you need to check for square. But any sort of frame construction is pretty much self-squaring and will tend to want to stay square. I built the dresser a while back for the magazine, and it's sort of a kind of double wide dresser. So I was really worried about sagging because there's no internal support, where the shelves meet a center divider. So it looks like just kind of a nice little rail at the bottom. But in terms of thickness, it's like a 2-inch by 4-inch thick piece. I mean, you can literally stand on that thing. And so I built everything about that piece was built with this notion that this is a big enough piece where on its own, the weight could take it out of square. But it was just but knowing that, you just built it in such a way with so much shoulder height, accumulated shoulder height area everywhere because it's frame and panel construction. It's not moving ever.
Yeah, because if your joinery is square, you could clamp it up. And in theory, if you measure out of square, it's a clamping issue.
Yeah. And then once it is glued up, I would say you shoot for square and whatever it is, as long as it's stable, you're okay. Because you can fit doors and drawers to slightly out of square openings. It's a hassle, but you can do it. And it'll be perfect forever if the case maintains its consistent lack of squareness over its lifetime. It's when the case moves and shifts, that's when everything else starts to fall down.
And one thing I learned from you was you always back off the clamps a little bit.
Yeah.
And
get it to close, loosen them up just enough so the clamps don't fall off.
Yeah.
Or the joint doesn't reopen up. Yeah.
And that helps you keep from racking your case while it's drying.
Yeah.
So, sorry to not answer that question, Fred.
It's always too much and not enough.
All right. This one is from Joe, frequent contributor on the Fine Woodworking forums. Yes, we have forums, people. I've mostly used solid wood to date. I see some projects where plywood may make sense. I don't know much about quality plywood other than Baltic birch. Could you please be so kind as to educate me on the various options out there worth considering for fine furniture? What should I avoid? Thank you so much, and may your tools remain sharp and rust-free. I love that. AK?
So this podcast for me, some of my answers are going to be a giant nod to Rowan Woodwork. And they did a guide to sheet goods. So prior to working on that article with them, so Rowan Woodwork is a cabinet making shop in the Hudson Valley, New York. And really, what's so funny?
The meme that you sent from him when he was at IWF.
Oh, yeah. Well,
it was the guy in the corner. It was the guy in the, so, you're at IWF and there's thousands of people around. And he sent Anissa a meme that he made. It's the lonely guy in the corner at a party and says, they have no idea I wrote an article for Fine Woodworking about plywood.
Well, it's a good thing I had asked him before I forwarded the meme on, because I'm paranoid about this. I was like that. I was cracking up. I was like, do you care if I send this on? So had I not asked permission,
because I have no filter,
right? which is a good thing. So yeah, I think even they're self-proclaimed wood nerds on the website. But Suzanne Walton built this business, and she has this amazing crew working with her there. But they did a guide to sheet goods, and prior to working on this article with them, I knew what I thought I knew about sheet goods, but man, there are so many products out there that I had no idea existed. 1, 2, that I would never have thought to use them in certain applications, like MDF in cabinets, just without veneer or anything on them, is perfect because they have MDF that's more moisture resistant for bathroom or kitchen applications. And
there's so many people yelling at the podcast right now.
That's okay.
That's not Fine Woodworking.
But it is. If you go on their website, rowanwoodwork.com, or on their Instagram, which is @rowanwoodwork, their stuff is amazingly beautiful, like incredible, down to the website and the curation of the Instagram account, which it should be. But they're so thoughtful about every aspect of the business, working with their clients, the grain matches, the way they source their materials, like they are top notch across the board. But if you read this article, Guide to Sheet Goods, you're going to find out about every sheet good that you could possibly use for furniture making, as well as the cabinets and built-ins and stuff like that. A lot of useful information in there. I mean, I could go through and read the different types of sheet goods, but nobody wants me to do that, right?
Yeah, what are your favorites, though?
I'm still blown away by the MDF, but, they talk about fin ply and phenolic plywood, which we've covered in the magazine. We had our outfeed table in the other shop made of the phenolic plywood, but we didn't really get into it as far as like really beautiful stuff can be made out of it. And that's one of my favorites. They talk about when to use pre-finished plywood. So like for interiors and backs of things, they talk about like really thick Garnica and Pluma ply, I think it is. Really, really thick but light, and where you can just use it for furniture, but you can also use it for shop fixtures. Like that one. Talk about, and just like the eye candy looking at their stuff is incredible.
Well, and you also, in your own work, like your wall, what is it? Your wall unit or whatever.
Oh, yeah, that was plywood.
Yeah, but like that, what is that? That was just high-end walnut plywood.
That was just high-end furniture grade walnut plywood.
Was there anything special about the core of it or anything?
No.
You bought for aesthetics. I
did, but I also didn't know about all this stuff. Like I didn't know that I could get like custom veneers on these different cores. Like I had no idea.
Okay, so all hell breaks loose. Mike forces you to redo that article, which was a nightmare.
Wouldn't be a nightmare now. The cabinets weren't the nightmare, though. It's those stupid posts.
What would I do? Use?
I would go back to this article and I would look and I would see which ones. Honestly, let me think about that for a second, Ben. I might use the same thing actually because I'm not doing anything. It's not around moisture. So I got lucky basically in what I did. I wasn't using anything like screws for joinery or anything like that. So I probably did do the right thing.
Okay.
Which was just a veneer, like a plywood core with the walnut veneer on it. So I did get lucky now that you're thinking about it, but I didn't know any of this stuff.
There's definitely a lot of different ply out there. And I know I've always just leaned towards Baltic birch, but the problem is it's pretty much ungettable now. I know that there's domestic suppliers that are going to try and fill the market, but it's going to take a little while for them to tool up. And for anyone curious about this aspect of the conversation, there's a phenomenal Shannon Rogers has his lumber industry update podcast or whatever, and he had a phenomenal episode about Baltic birch and the gap in the market now. And obviously a lot of Baltic birch comes from Russia, and that's not going to be imported anymore. And the real problem is that it sounds like Baltic birch is used in many, 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 many industries. And that's the real problem right now, and trying to tool up and fill the hole for flooring industries and things like that. And they couldn't care less about,
300 woodworkers who need a sheet of Baltic birch ply. Yes.
Yeah. But, and there's apple ply, but apparently some of the domestic plywoods were skinned Baltic birch. And so they're not able to fill the market either, So there's Baltic birch was always my go-to if I could afford it and get it, but now I'm kind of at a loss as well.
My scraps in my shop are getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah. I actually should have done this earlier. I'm looking at my text messages. This a student of mine, John, messaged me the other day about Premcore Plus plywood. And it sounds like another alternative that is new to the market. So unfortunately, plywood's constantly changing, and the markets are always changing.
So what about like plywood versus solid wood in furniture making? Is that real woodworking or is it not?
Oh, Mike just came right out with it. I don't know. You're the editor of Fine Woodworking Magazine. I think you get to say.
I think it depends on the customer's expectations.
Okay. All right.
Like, for instance, I made a little dresser for my daughter. And again, we talked about not wanting this thing to rack over time. The back of that cherry dresser was a piece of 1/2-inch Baltic birch screwed to that frame because that thing's not moving. But then when I think when I did the article for the magazine or when I did the piece for a client, I thought, yeah, but are they going to want plywood? And in the magazine, are they going to freak out that there's a plywood back? Like, are we, crossing streams here? Is this weird? Which, of course, the answer is like, just do it whatever you want to do. One thing I do to sort of get around it is and I think, did I learn this from Chris Bexford? I may have. I don't want to say Chris uses plywood if he doesn't, but I thought I learned from him, I'll just get 1/2-inch cherry ply and frame it in solid stock. So it's literally a frame and panel, but the panel is plywood, which means it's stable, which means you can glue it into the frame. So you're making a super, super stable panel.
That's brilliant.
Which looks really nice. And then that gets inset and glued into the case. I know Chris glues his backs into his pieces. I'm not sure if he uses plywood as panels for that or not. He may not.
Today's his birthday.
Happy birthday, Chris.
Happy birthday, Chris. Gosh, I don't think I've done a big case with him in a really long time, and I cannot remember. We've been doing a lot of...
I mean, it would make it just absolutely authentic looking and bomb-proof, so...
Yeah, and then the other thing is like, no, there's really good reasons to use quote-unquote plywood. I mean, Krenov, and you use this at the school, like I was reading a James Krenov book, like, all Mr. Woodwork, and here's how I make shop-made plywood. It's like, what? And it's like, oh, yeah. It's like you got a few boards and you want to like spread that wood all over a piece and make the most use of this lumber. Just thin it up and glue it on some shop-made plywood. It's super stable. It's a good way to build, and you get to stretch the lumber that you have.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry, because it's thick. It's not commercial veneer.
Right.
You have the luxury of sanding it down and not having to worry about it. I have a piece or two that need to just be a little refinished, a lot refinished, but I can just take a sander to them, and I have like at least an 1/8 inch to work with. I'm not going to sand through to the core, which is great. But even with, you have to really beat furniture to mess it up, like if you have a decent finish on there. My kids are not gentle on that wall unit. It has some scratches here and there, but all the furniture in our house is kind of dinged up. I don't have anything super precious in there.
Well, I think the only time I've ever seen plywood go wrong is, somebody refinishing it and sanding through the veneers, or if moisture gets to it. And it's,
older pieces, kind of Art Deco pieces where the really thin veneer is all bubbled up. You buy that at the flea market and someone says, "Can you repair this?" It's like, no.
I kind of like the way that looks.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to that whole, I used to, like, I felt like a failure if I used a screw to hold a joint together in my first pieces, and then it was like, oh, I can't use plywood because that's not a real woodworker.
Sure.
Doesn't use plywood. And I remember I built for a friend of mine a huge wall unit that broke apart into 6 pieces so that they were living in apartments, so they wanted to be able to move. But this was, it took up a whole wall. And I remember going over costs, and they were just paying for materials and going over costs. I said, well, this is going to be like 15 or 16 sheets of plywood. And one of my friends says, plywood? Oh, and they were like distraught over it. I was like, well, first off, we couldn't possibly build this in solid wood. It can't be done with the limitations set forth. A, the size of my shop, B, my tooling at the time, and the fact that it had to break down and be stable and blah, blah,
Right.
And there's a place for everything. And, we bought decent plywood, and it's still kicking. And if it had been made out of solid wood, it would not still be kicking, because there's no way that this stuff would have gone together the way it went with plywood. There's a place for everything. And I'm sure Rowan Woodwork loves projects that call for all solid wood. And they combine
solid wood with the plywood.
Right.
End of the day, they have clients that are paying for the project. So
if you're listening, you have to go on their website and check out their work. It is beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful work, and just cool people too. Yeah. And Susan's just like, she's a rock star.
Yeah, you should pack up all your gear and go do a shop tour and a podcast with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then take me out to eat lunch with you guys.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe you should pack up the gear and go do a podcast with them.
You don't know what to do with any of this stuff.
All right. You all want to do all-time favorites or something? Segments?
Sure.
Well, you didn't mention any segment.
How many podcasts have we done now? 278 of them.
Right. But usually you tell us what segment. So I made up my own segment.
Did you wash your hands? Am I your mom reminding you to wash your hands after you get out of the bathroom?
No. So I just went rogue and I made up my own segment. Ben's not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want.
Oh, yeah, because I'm able to rein you in anyways. Well, you want to go first?
Sure. So my new segment, what was the last one I made up? I made up one last time too.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, my proudest woodworking moment.
Oh, yeah,
This one is, you know how there's that question that people ask, like, who would you most like to spend a day with? Like if you had, it's like one of those canned questions. You've heard that one before, like, who? Okay. So I think we should do, which woodworker, deceased woodworker from before 2000,
wow,
would you want to spend the day with?
I think they'll
Anybody in the history of all woodworking.
ornery, opinionated. You're just not going to ever agree with anything you do and the way you've done it. And then they're just going to make you feel bad.
So, but
everything you've done.
Really?
This is interesting.
That's where you're going with that?
Yes.
This is interesting though, because you exclude Krenov, you exclude Maloof, right? Before 2000.
Right.
Okay, so Taya, Fred, was he around? I mean, before 2000, that was a long time ago. Ugh.
Oh, yeah. All right, so let's do 2010.
No. Yeah, so we're excluding the normal, I'd like to, the deceased woodworker. A part of me wants to say someone who are the rooms, whatever, they made the puzzle furniture, like Craig Thibodeau. You know what I'm
yes,
talking about.
I do. And if you would have asked me before you said that, I could have told you. I can't pronounce it anyway, so I may as well not remember it.
Okay, so I just Googled puzzle furniture, and Craig is the first thing that comes up. So he now has that.
Who is alive and well. Just in case
is it
anybody was wondering.
Rutgen.
Something.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Because that would be interesting to figure out, to talk to them, and because it was a father-son, I believe, right?
I don't know.
It would be interesting to talk to them and just say, and to see why and how. I think they know the how, but I want to know the why. What brought you to this? Of making puzzle furniture in the 19th century, I believe, early 19th century, that has the most elaborate mechanisms and is all, completely analog, and there's no digital controls. There's no electricity involved. It just seems like that's where it starts to me.
Yeah.
And why did you get here?
I don't think I'd pick a woodworker.
But that was the segment.
I'd pick a designer.
Oh, all right.
And especially like a mid-century designer, like a modernist designer, where so much of the philosophy of the time was tied into what things looked like, how they functioned. It could even be like Russell Wright. It could be Hans Wegner. It could be an architect of the period who was really working, who wrote the treatise 10 Rules for Design. He was an industrial designer. They're let me do this. And
Dieter Rahm?
Yeah. God, that was killing me.
Yeah, I mean, where it's just because of the design is the philosophy is driving the design. And so it isn't this whim of what it should look like. It's not ornamentation. It's not, what do they call it? I hate that. You go to the museum and the furniture is in the decorative arts section. And I just don't think of it as decorative arts. I guess it is, You buy it if, for a certain trend. When the trend is over, you throw it out and buy new furniture. But Dieter Rams is 10 design principles. Dieter Ram. Good design is innovative. Good design makes a product useful. Good design is aesthetic. Good design makes a product understandable. Good design is unobtrusive. Good design is honest. It is durable. It is consequent to the last detail. It is eco-friendly. And good design is as little design as possible. Bam. That's like the rest of my woodworking career can just be like mining those ideas right there.
I like it.
So, well, that had legs.
Yeah.
Nice job, Anissa.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the question?
Yeah, throwing it out there and Mike like brushing it off, and then all of a sudden like running with it.
But not any of the people who actually made that work, just the people.
No, but I think you could definitely make a case for your angle.
We'll let it go.
Yeah. Thank you. Otherwise, I'd be arguing against it, right?
He's also the boss. So.
Well, I would still.
Okay, so I co-opted that conversation. What you have some thoughts on that because you brought up the question.
Yeah, I would like to hang out with, and I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly because he's Danish, or he was Danish. So Peter Moos, Pedermoos. I am super drawn to his work. Oh, you guys are looking it up. It's beautiful. And it's mid-century aesthetic. It's very simple looking, but there's usually like one detail that complicates it a bit. It's very sparse. And I think the thing that draws me to his work also is like, he was a little kooky. He has, I'll have to send a link to you, Ben, for maybe to for people to link.
A little bit of like Wharton Estrick.
Yes, very, very similar in that. And I really love Wharton Estrick's work, and I want to get down to that house again soon.
Cool.
But the thing that really got me hooked on him was that if you Google Peter Moos window bed or something like that, it'll come up. It has that retractable bed that comes right out of his window, and he could sleep outside every night. That's the ultimate. But he was a little kooky in that way, but his work is just stunningly pretty.
That is the most brilliant idea I've ever heard.
The retractable bed out of the window?
And it just goes from one side of the room. No, well,
he's just like cantilevered out the window on this bed.
But it just goes from like you could sleep inside.
Right.
Or you can push it out
and push it outside.
And it's the same bed.
It's fantastic.
Make it musty.
Like a sleeping bag.
I don't know. If I ever have the means, I'm doing it.
That's very cool.
It would be very cool, right? So I think it would be cool to hang out with him for a day. And I bet you he's a good cook. Or he was. But I'm only basing that on like little quirky, really good design sense. He reminds me a little bit of Hank Gilpin, who, if you go there,
Hank Gilpin's a good cook.
He's an amazing cook. So therefore, Peter Moos must have been an amazing cook also. Well, you see where I'm going with that.
Sure. I can stand by it.
Hang out, talk to him about the way he made all the different stuff that he made. See his window bed. Ask him if he sleeps better outside than he does inside. And he would make me a really nice vegetarian lunch.
Cool. All right. Game on.
Curry.
All right. Let's take a break. Regardless of your skill level in woodworking or home repair, you want a glue that you can trust. Because a glue that doesn't work can ruin any project in a hurry. Fortunately, Titebond has the glue you need to get the job done with confidence. From interior glues with strong initial tack and short clamp times, to exterior glues with exceptional strength and water resistance, look to Titebond for the right glue for your next project. For more information, visit titebond.com, Titebond.com. So I totally forgot Anissa co-opted that.
Yeah. Well, sort of I think when we started thinking about it, and it brought to mind that I think there are plenty of living woodworkers that I would put in that category. Like you mentioned Hank Gilpin. Yeah, I'd want to spend it, but like you have.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful job. I'm always stuck in the office.
I asked him for a manuscript on clamping blocks. They're not calls. Don't call them calls. I asked him for a manuscript.
Are you pulling up text messages from Hank Gilpin right now?
No, he doesn't have a cell phone.
Oh.
That's a flex right there, isn't it?
I would, but he doesn't have a cell phone.
Hank Gilpin. He said, so I asked him a couple questions. I said, yeah, I need some words up front because last time we did this funky thing where I didn't have a manuscript first. I need some words up front, such as, what's the difference between a clamping block and a call? When do you need a clamping block? Why don't you want to live without clamping blocks? How do you make clamping blocks? All the other fascinating stuff you want to say about clamping blocks that I don't know to list here. Trying to like get him to write something for me.
Yes.
He wrote A, 1, night and day. 2, always. 3, chaos prevails. 4, with careful attention to objective. 5, 1001 clamping moments. H. That's the manuscript that I got.
Didn't Benson do an article with him one time that was just like notes that he got mailed to him?
There's all
Of
postcards.
Yeah.
Yes, the entire manuscript and postcards. Yeah.
Strap in, Anissa.
Please frame your answer in complete sentences. Explain why.
So maybe I go up and he'll talk. If I go there, he'll talk about it and you're just like, oh my, you just blew my mind. And I think you converted some of his voice memos for me once.
I don't even bother to listen.
Yeah. But it was just like this, and that's how I ended up putting a lot of that into the article. And he'll just, maybe I go up, have lunch, and have him talk about clamping blocks and show me, and then come back and then use that as a manuscript to provide a shot list. Or maybe I just get him to write something.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck and Godspeed. Mike, do you have an all-time favorite?
Yeah. The first one was, it's going to take as long as it takes. Like, deal with that, embrace that. And that comes to mind in my own shop if I'm rushing, and especially if it's like, okay, you have a lot of things to do on a project. What's the most important thing to do right now? And it's like, every single task is equally important. If you try to assign importance to one over the other, you're going to rush over one, or you're going to skip one and get to the one you think is important and then realize you should have done like 5 little tiny unimportant things first before you did this one. I also see it in my classes, which unfortunately it's a really stressful, artificial environment to build furniture. If you're in a class of 10 or 12 people and you're tasked with building a project over 5 or 6 days, there's this notion that you find yourself competing with the people around you or with the whole pace of the class. Am I behind? And I stress, we all work at our own pace. We all have our own clock speed, and trying to rush that is only going to ruin our enjoyment and the quality of work that we're doing. So it's just that it's going to take as long as it takes. And even though, okay, it's got to be done by a certain time, or you only have 15 minutes a day to work, just like be there in that 15 minutes, do what you can do, try to find a good groove, and just say, good job, and then just move on. That was what it was going to be. But then I was like remaking a jig. It's like it's basically, we did an article on this and it's super smart. Michael Fortune did this with a regular biscuit joiner, but in using a domino, one way to use it is to secure it to a platform, and then you can bring a workpiece in, clamp that down to the platform, and you can really use it really, really efficiently. I use that for doing small doors that don't have panels. I like domino joinery. It's really fast. And I just grabbed this sort of bench horse, this big platform that I used to clamp to my bench to clamp other things down to it. I had an extra one, and I put down a bunch of stops to register a domino. I put down some stops and a hold down to register the work pieces. And just because that was like the first time I used it, every time I taught a project, I would just use this same big old thing and take it to my class and re-outfit the stops for whatever the project I was working on. And last night I finally said, okay, well, I'm teaching a class in November where I need this thing, but I'm prepping for a class in March where I'm going to need it again. It's like, well, I'll just build a second one. And then I looked at this big giant thing and I realized, oh, it doesn't have to be that big. So I made one like super small, super tight, and then also not one designed to be taken apart and used for a bunch of things, but it was built for a specific use. This is built for this project with these work pieces of this size. And it's like the cleanest, coolest little thing. But it had to start out with the big clunky thing. Like you got to go big and clunky first before you can go super clean later. And I think that's the biggest realization too, is like in order to cut that next dovetail better, you got to cut this one kind of crappy. In order to get better at your design, you got to do your best designing this one, live with everything you don't like about it, and it's going to inform that next piece. So do your best. Deal with it, give yourself a pat on the back, and then do better next time.
Well, I mean, they're one and the same, though. It takes as long as it takes. It takes as many iterations as long as...
Wow, full circle. Yeah.
So it's a revision process that we're talking about, essentially.
Yeah, it's like you got to try your best in order to get to that place you eventually want to be. You got to go through what you're going through right now. But you have to attack everything mindfully. Like you can build 20 pieces and not progress beyond that unless you're really working towards something with each of those 20 pieces to get where you want to go.
Geez, that's a personal development thing too.
Yes. When you have a good kid, you got to raise 2. Then that third one, you're going to like nail that. And the other 2, they're just going to be a pain in the butt. So, or stop at 1, give all of your devotion to that one. You're probably going to be good.
Every parent of 2 children right now is like, oh. This next question is from Luke. I'm about to embark on my next project, building an L-shaped desk for my wife's home office. The wood will be solid maple from a tree we had taken down in our yard. She plans to work along the side of the long side of the L, not in the corner. I'm planning on using some variation of Chris Gochner's sideboard from issue 277 under the short side of the L, with a third bay under the corner for IT gear that will be assessed rarely. However, I admit the aesthetics of the cabinet under the corner is concerning me. Any suggestions on how to treat the space under the intersection of the L? Further, the design for the desktop at the L is throwing me off. A full 45-degree miter joint seems visually pleasing, but I fear it might be prone to opening up over the year at that length. The butt joint is a bit visually clunky, but easier to execute with a breadboard-like joint moving in one direction. Any expert guidance on how to approach the L desk in solid wood is very much appreciated. Luke's got a lot going on. Yeah.
What do you got?
So I have 0% expertise on the L shape, or for underneath or on top. So guess who I asked for some information?
Susan Walton.
Yes, Suzanne and Owen and Chris and Brady and Morgan and those guys over there. So Rowan Woodwork again, because I figured they must have come across this a bazillion times. And I got a great answer. So Owen had emailed back and he said that I think I may have asked for some kind of magical solution to this. And he said this is the actual magic hardware that they use in their corners. And he sent me a link to a YouTube video from Hoffele? How do you pronounce that?
The Hoffel, or the German hardware manufacturer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, you're all going to just leave me hanging out here. Okay,
Yeah.
whatever. So they have a really cool, and I'll send you this link. I'm going to send you 2 links, Ben, to add. They have some great hardware solutions for making an opening with storage that you can pull out and access the stuff in that little corner.
Oh, cool.
And then for the top concern, he said you can go with either of those, but definitely use some kind of bolt system. And he sent me a link for that also. He said, as for the counters, you could go either way, but I would definitely recommend a mechanical connection like a countertop bolt or something, especially if they go butt joints for the lack of a good glue surface. And then all of this came with a threat that said, I hope that helps. I could talk for hours about this stuff, so let me know if this isn't enough. But
we'll let Luke let us know.
Right.
Yeah. So, all right. So the hardware solution is the bottom bolts or whatever. I think I saw like a Lee Valley.
Oh, yeah. So those are you'll say Lee Valley, right?
I know how to pronounce it.
There is a zip bolt countertop connector.
Okay.
And you can see it's kind of just like that. You have to do the 2 Forstner bit holes in there. And then
and they're rounded, so the Forstner bit.
Across the joint connecting them.
Right.
And just basically you're pulling it
tightening them together and keeping them tight, which is very cool. Good to know.
I always think about, though, with the miter, I always think about Mike's dissertation on the angle changing based on wood movement.
Yeah.
But on plywood panels, edge with solid stock, you're not going to have that issue. So maybe we can go with a plywood L instead of solid stock.
But they didn't cut the plywood from their yard like they did with this tree.
Oh, did I miss that part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tree taken down from our yard.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So special wood.
Wood would be solid maple from a tree. It doesn't all have to be solid maple.
That's true.
Or just solid maple veneer over plywood. Make your own plywood. Anyway, there's so many questions to this. It really gets to the heart of this is what furniture design is. So, I mean, number one, you're starting with a Chris Gochner piece with sideboard. So it's a freestanding piece. And then somehow you're adding an L-shaped top to a freestanding piece. And then is the L connected? And why are we doing that? And does the L, do the 2 pieces have to connect at the same level?
That's what I was wondering.
One just be higher than the other? So that they just kind of overlap. And also because this doesn't sound like it's a built-in, like those connectors and stuff for big wide countertops where they meet in a corner, I think that's designed for like built-in countertops and stuff. Like you're not moving this. So you don't want to glue up a big giant L tabletop and have to get that from the shop into your house. You probably want that to be able to break down at some point. I think the main thing for me is how does a beautiful Chris Gochner sideboard in any way or form complement an L-shaped home office countertop? Like I can't imagine that. So I think for me, before I start to think about the mechanics, it's like, what is this going to look like? Maybe you want a sideboard for storage adjacent to a desk that you sit at. Like, why does this need to be? I don't know.
With the finishings, with the aesthetic finishings of Gochner's.
I don't know.
I love the idea of like overlapping pieces, having the two
height,
the 2
split
halves of the L on different planes. And then you've got a spot for like, a paper holder or a place to slide your laptop into while it's charging, or, there's so many ways that you could go of making that space usable.
Yeah.
Then, and you don't have the wood movement issues. You don't have the connector issues. You don't have to use plywood. And yeah, it might be like, the sideboard meets desk scenario.
Yeah. And just Google it. I mean, I would like if a client came to me with this, number one, I'd say my friend Andy will do a better job at this. Go talk to Andy. However, I would like Google this and just see as many examples of L-shaped home office solutions as I could. And my first instinct wouldn't be to go to something like an unrelated sideboard and try to incorporate it. I would look at L-shaped solutions and see how everything works together. And
then see how the sideboard thing works with that.
Yeah. And then maybe work backwards from there to at least get the basic structure of the piece and how that's going to work and function. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a really big challenge, Luke, and I would say it's just going to take a lot of head scratching, a lot of looking before you come up with what you really want to come up with. But it's a really fun challenge too. So, go for it and definitely send in some pictures when you're done. Let us see what you came up with.
Ooh, yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
I guess I thought he was not using the sideboard as a sideboard, but maybe taking some of the aesthetics of that and incorporating it into the office furniture kind of thing. But I could be completely mistaken. It's hard to tell the way the question's
so the
written.
sideboard is basically a case on stand. It's got some sliding doors, I think.
2 sliding doors, 3 drawers in the middle.
Yeah.
Some
There's some spalting in that, right?
maple,
Yeah. And it has really nice recessed pulls.
Yeah.
I guess I thought he was going to take those elements and maybe not reproduce them as a sideboard, but take those elements and put them into the L-shaped, more traditional office style.
Well, when I look at that piece, I think like, what are the important visual aesthetics of this piece? Like, what makes this piece itself? And I think it's the spalted maple panels.
And it's a case on stand.
It's a case on stand, but like, is that more important than the maple panels? No, I don't think so. Are the recessed poles important? Yes. The legs are like kind of like a cabriole, like a pillowed kind of, like your shaker single board.
Are they?
It looks kind of like it, but
it's just a slightly wider base with kind of tapered legs. Yeah.
So, like, what are the elements of it that is making me drawn to this piece?
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous piece.
It's a gorgeous, yeah. He nailed it. I think in my time here, the cover articles that have gotten the most comments are that piece and Michael Robbins' desk.
Oh.
And Anissa's
wall cabinet.
Yeah.
You're just making that up now because I'm sitting here.
Yeah, that's kind of awkward because there's only one issue away from Anissa's piece.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a beautiful piece. I think it's great to use it as a starting point aesthetically. But then I think it is, how are you going to incorporate those elements into what you want?
All right, let's hit the last question real quick. And I think this should be doable.
Okay.
From Paul. In the first picture of Mike's shop, in his first book, I noticed a Tormek sharpener. Which tasks does he defer to use the Tormek over whetstones? I was lucky enough to have someone give me their Tormek when they shut down the shop, and I'm learning the ways of it and its various jigs.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not really an either or. I use a Tormek in the same way you might use a high-speed grinder, in that I only use it to establish or reestablish a hollow grind before I then go to Waterstones and hone the final bevel on there. So while it's technically capable of doing a million things, I use it for one thing, which seems like the opposite of overkill, whatever that is. Like, why are you buying this whole thing and only using it for this? Because it does it really, really well, and that's all I need it to do. And I'm probably going to replace my Tormek with another Tormek because my 10-inch wheel is now down to about like 7.5-inch diameter wheel.
The whole machine's got some miles on it.
Yeah, and it's like, well, just put a new wheel on. It's like, I'm pretty sure it's rusted through the shaft, and that ain't coming off.
You've had the thing a while, haven't you?
Yeah. The main thing for me is that they have the new sort of
CBN diamond style.
Yeah, the diamond style. So it's like a metal wheel with diamond coating or some other type of coating. And I don't know. I guess the problem for that is once the diamond wears out, your wheel wears out. Whereas with the normal whetstone, you just flatten it And yeah, it gets smaller in diameter, but this thing has lasted me 20 years at least.
It's pretty, I mean, so the stone lasts you as long as the workings of the machine are likely to hang on.
Yeah.
And one thing, I think there's a lot of people upgrading to the diamond wheels. I bet you the used market for the other wheels is probably pretty.
Well, now I noticed you can buy a Tormek. It's totally stripped down with no wheels. So you're just buying the motor and then you can put whatever wheel you want. I was thinking about that, but I might go back. So if you got one, awesome. If it didn't come with it, buy like a wheel dresser, not just that abrasive stone with two different grits on each side, but it's a wheel dresser that attaches to that guidepost, and you can like advance it across really accurately to flatten the wheel and to make it parallel to the guidepost. Get that, because without that, it's kind of tough to use. And most schools I teach at, if there's a Tormek, or shops we visit to photograph, there's a Tormek on a shelf covered in dust because no one uses it. I'm not going to say they don't use it well. They just don't find a use for it. So, but I love it just for that, for one thing, establishing hollow grinds, but it does it very accurately, very evenly. A little bit slow if you have to reestablish, but no burning, super accurate, which then makes sharpening really, really fast after that.
And kind of getting to a podcast that we had talked about a few ago with a grinder and just setting the bevel angle with the rest and all that stuff. With a Tormek, the thickness of the blade, it's referencing off the back of the blade. So you can set it to 25 degrees or whatever.
I raise and lower it. I get it close, and then you slide it with the wheel turned off. You slide the blade across. You look at the scratch pattern. And if it's not centered on the hollow grind of the bevel, you adjust it up and down until there's like a screw micro adjust, which is nice. And then you just adjust it until that little scratch mark is centered on the bevel, which means that you're removing as little steel as possible to reestablish that hollow, rather than being off one way or the other and having to remove too much steel.
So you're still letting the bevel be dictated by what's there already, and adjusting it on a case by case basis. Yeah. Okay, cool. Right on. Well, that about does it for this episode. Anybody got anything? Recommendations? Dinkle's Wood Shop.
Yeah, that's good. I was going to mention them when you're talking about knockdown fasteners.
Yes.
She has a tremendous little YouTube video on threaded inserts, and she did something I'd never seen before and I've never done, where of course you drill the hole, the diameter of the insert, but then she also did a very shallow counter bore, so that little lip at the top is recessed slightly. Normally I would just like screw it down until it just kind of pulled itself down, but it's like, a shallow counter bore, that's brilliant.
Yeah, because it like mushrooms out. Yeah. No, and just her YouTube channel is fantastic. Her Instagram's fantastic. It's she's a young woodworker. It's like, woodworking content for people who are into anime.
Yeah.
And I don't understand half of what she does. Barry tells me it's very on point because it just goes right over my head. But it's just great content, super creative. She's very artistic with her videos and the way she assembles them, and just I'm a huge fan of her work. Great, really creative presentation, but her information is super solid. Yeah, it's a great combination. Yeah.
Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have any questions or comments, conversation starters you'd like to send in, please send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. If you are watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button and maybe leave a nice comment. That always helps the algorithm along. If you feel so inclined, 5-star reviews on iTunes helps the show be seen by many others, and they're always appreciated. All right, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
I think Mike is losing it.
Does it make you feel better?